Most people think the Ferrari F40 is just another exotic supercar from the 80s. Sure, you know it's red, it's fast, and it probably costs more than your house. But if you thought you knew everything about Enzo Ferrari's final masterpiece, you're wrong. What you didn't know is that this car broke so many rules and had so many bizarre features that even Ferrari engineers thought some of them were crazy. In the next few minutes, you'll discover 20 weird facts about the F40 that will completely change how you see this legendary machine, including one that involves the Sultan of Brunei doing something to his F40 collection that would make any car enthusiast cry. Enzo's last sign off. The F40 wasn't just another Ferrari model. It was literally the last car that Enzo Ferrari personally commissioned and approved before his death. Think about that for a second. This wasn't some committee decision or marketing department project. The old man himself, at 89 years old, sat down and said, "This is how I want to celebrate Ferrari's 40th anniversary." He was involved in every detail, from the engine specs to the body design. When the car was revealed in 1987, Enzo had less than a year to live. He knew this would be his final statement to the world, his automotive last will and testament. The pressure on the engineers must have been incredible. Imagine knowing you're building the last car your legendary boss will ever approve. No wonder they went absolutely crazy with the design, throwing out every luxury feature and comfort item to create something that was pure, distilled speed. This wasn't just a car, it was Enzo's farewell gift to the automotive world. 11 composite body pieces. Here's something that'll blow your mind. The entire body of the F40 is made from just 11 pieces. Not 11 types of pieces, but 11 actual panels total. How did they pull this off? Ferrari used massive single-piece front and rear clamshells that covered huge sections of the car. This wasn't about cutting costs or speeding up production. It was pure engineering brilliance aimed at making the car as light and rigid as possible. Most cars from that era used dozens, sometimes hundreds of individual body panels all welded or bolted together. Each connection point adds weight and creates a potential weak spot. Ferrari's engineers looked at that traditional approach and said, forget it. They developed these enormous composite pieces that were incredibly difficult and expensive to manufacture. If you damage one of these panels in a minor accident, you couldn't just replace a fender or a door. You'd need to replace an entire front or rear section. The manufacturing process was so complex that each clamshell took days to produce. But the payoff was worth it. The F40's body had the structural rigidity of a race car while weighing less than most economy cars' bodies. Kevlar, carbon, and Nomex mix. The F40's body wasn't just carbon fiber like everyone assumes. Ferrari created a space-age sandwich using Kevlar, carbon fiber, and aluminum honeycomb cores filled with Nomex. If those materials sound familiar, it's because they're the same stuff used in bulletproof vests, fighter jets, and Formula One cars. The combination was revolutionary for a road car in 1987. Each material served a specific purpose. The carbon fiber provided incredible strength and stiffness. The Kevlar added impact resistance and prevented the carbon from shattering in a crash. The aluminum honeycomb core kept the panels rigid without adding weight, while the Nomex filling provided fire resistance. Building these panels required techniques borrowed from the aerospace industry. Ferrari couldn't just stamp them out like steel body panels. Each piece had to be carefully laid up by hand, layer by layer, then cured in massive autoclaves under precise temperature and pressure conditions. The whole process was more like building a spacecraft than a car. One Ferrari engineer later admitted they had no idea if this construction method would hold up over time. They were essentially experimenting on customers who were paying hundreds of thousands of dollars. Fortunately, their gamble paid off. F40 bodies have proven remarkably durable over the decades. 3 exhaust outlets, 1 wastegate. Take a look at the back of an F40 and you'll notice something odd. 3 exhaust pipes. But here's the weird part. They're not all doing the same job. The 2 outer pipes handle the actual exhaust from each bank of the V8 engine. That middle pipe, it's purely for dumping boost pressure from the turbo wastegates. This setup was borrowed directly from Ferrari's racing programs, where every bit of turbo response mattered. By giving the wastegate its own dedicated outlet, Ferrari eliminated any back pressure that might slow down boost control. In street driving, this system created some interesting side effects. When the turbos hit full boost and the wastegates opened, that center pipe would literally scream. Not exhaust note scream, more like a banshee wail that could be heard blocks away. Some owners loved it, calling it the F40's war cry. Others found it embarrassing in traffic. The separate wastegate pipe also meant the car shot flames from 3 places instead of 2 during hard shifts. Ferrari claimed this was perfectly normal, though it scared the hell out of valets and parking attendants. Early cars had sliding Lexan. The first F40 models that rolled out of Maranello didn't have normal windows. Instead, they used sliding Lexan panels, basically racing-style plastic windows that you push sideways to open. Ferrari's logic was simple. Rolling windows need heavy regulators, motors, and mechanisms. All that stuff adds weight. The Lexan panels weighed almost nothing and slid on simple tracks. Plus, they were nearly indestructible compared to glass. But customers started complaining immediately. The plastic windows scratched easily, they were noisy at speed, and trying to hand money to a toll booth attendant through a 6-inch sliding gap was a nightmare. Some owners reported that the windows would pop out of their tracks during hard cornering. Ferrari eventually caved and switched to proper wind-down glass windows, but purists consider the early sliding window cars more desirable today. They're lighter, rarer, and more true to Ferrari's original no-compromise vision. If you see an F40 with sliding windows, you're looking at one of the very first examples built. These cars also tend to have other early production quirks that make them special to collectors. No ABS or power assist. In an era when even economy cars were getting anti-lock brakes and power steering, Ferrari deliberately left both off the F40. No ABS, no brake booster, no power steering, just you, the car, and pure mechanical connection. The steering wheel was connected directly to the front wheels through an unassisted rack. At parking speeds, turning the wheel required genuine muscle. Ferrari test drivers joked that F40 owners would develop Popeye forearms, but once you got rolling, the steering came alive with feedback. You could feel every pebble, every change in road surface, every tiny slip of the front tires. The brakes were even more hardcore. The pedal was rock hard and required serious leg strength. But the feel was incredible. You could modulate the braking force with millimeter precision. Of course, without ABS, locking the wheels was always just 1 millimeter too far. Ferrari's attitude was basically, learn to drive better. They figured anyone buying an F40 should have the skills to handle it without electronic nannies. This philosophy seems insane by today's standards, but it created a driving experience that modern supercars still can't match. Twin IHE turbos, Weber Marelli brain. The F40's engine bay was a high-tech wonderland for 1987. Twin water-cooled IHI turbochargers forced air into the 2.9-liter V8, while a sophisticated Weber Marelli electronic system tried to keep everything under control. But here's the weird part. Some F40 models actually had 2 separate ECUs, one for each bank of cylinders. The Weber Marelli IAW system was cutting-edge technology, but it was also temperamental. Early cars suffered from all sorts of electronic gremlins. Sometimes one bank of cylinders would run rich while the other ran lean. Boost control could be erratic, with one turbo spooling faster than the other. Ferrari mechanics spent countless hours trying to get the 2 ECUs to talk to each other properly. The twin-turbo setup itself was a packaging nightmare. Ferrari squeezed those IHI turbos into impossibly tight spaces, which made them run incredibly hot. The water cooling helped, but F40 engine bays still reached temperatures that would melt lesser components. Smart owners learned to let their cars cool down after hard driving before shutting off the engine. The complexity of this system meant that F40 engines required very specific expertise to maintain. Even today, only a handful of specialists truly understand all the quirks of the Weber Marelli system. Optional dog clutch gearbox Ferrari offered F40 buyers a choice that seems bizarre today. You could order your car with a racing-style dog clutch gearbox instead of the standard synchronized transmission. Ferrari literally called it the option for piloti, for racing drivers. A dog clutch box has no synchros to help match gear speeds. You have to perfectly rev match every shift or the gears simply won't engage. Get it wrong and you'll hear expensive grinding noises, but get it right and shifts happen instantly, with a satisfying mechanical clunk. Only a handful of customers were brave or skilled enough to order this option. The dog box made the F40 nearly impossible to drive in traffic. You couldn't ease into gear at a stoplight. It was either engaged or not. Reverse was particularly tricky, often requiring multiple attempts to slot home. But on a racetrack, the dog box transformed the F40. Shifts that took half a second with the standard box happened in milliseconds. You could keep your foot planted through upshifts, letting the violent engagement of the dogs provide engine braking. Today, F40 models with the dog clutch option are incredibly rare and sought after by collectors who actually track their cars. Seats came in 3 sizes. Forget about adjustable seats, the F40 didn't have them. Instead, Ferrari offered fixed carbon fiber buckets in 3 sizes: small, medium, and large. When you ordered your F40, you literally had to go to the dealer and try on seats like you were buying shoes. The seats were bolted directly to the floor with no adjustment possible. If you were between sizes, tough luck. If you wanted to let your shorter spouse drive occasionally, too bad. Ferrari's logic was that sliding seat rails add weight and reduce rigidity. Plus, in their mind, an F40 was a personal statement. Why would anyone else need to drive your car? The sizing process was surprisingly crude. Dealers had sample seats that customers would sit in while pretending to hold a steering wheel. Once you picked your size, that's what you got. No returns, no exchanges. Some customers discovered too late that medium in Italian sizing meant something different than they expected. The fixed seats did have one advantage. They never rattled or came loose like adjustable seats could. And the driving position, once you found the right size, was perfect. Your body became part of the car's structure, which helped you feel every input and force. Still, more than one F40 has been retrofitted with adjustable rails by subsequent owners who couldn't fit the original buyer's choice. First road car claimed at 200 plus. MPH Ferrari shocked the automotive world by claiming the F40 could exceed 324 kilometers per hour. That's 201 miles per hour. This made it officially the first production car to break the 200 MP barrier, beating Porsche's 959 to the punch. But here's where it gets interesting. Ferrari was very careful about how they worded this claim. They said the car was capable of 201 MP, not that every F40 would definitely hit that speed. The reality was more complicated. Yes, some F40 models did achieve and even exceed 200 MP in testing, but variables like temperature, altitude, fuel quality, and even tire pressure made a huge difference. Not every car was equally fast, and not every driver was brave enough to find out. The 200 MP claim became a marketing sensation. Every car magazine wanted to verify it, leading to some spectacular high-speed runs on closed highways and test tracks. Some succeeded, some fell just short. The variability only added to the F40's mystique. What nobody talked about was how terrifying the F40 became at those speeds. The front end would get light, the steering became vague, and the whole car felt like it wanted to take flight. Ferrari's aerodynamicists later admitted they prioritized cooling over high-speed stability. Pirelli P0 developed for it. Pirelli created an entirely new tire just for the F40, the original P0. This wasn't a modified existing tire or a slightly wider version of something else. Pirelli's engineers started from scratch to handle the F40's unique combination of power, weight, and speed. The development process was intense. Pirelli tested dozens of compounds and construction techniques, trying to balance grip with durability. The F40's twin turbos could destroy regular tires in minutes of hard driving. The final P0 design used a special compound that stayed sticky up to incredibly high temperatures. But here's the catch. These tires were so specialized that they were terrible in the rain. The tread pattern was minimal, designed purely for dry grip. Early F40 owners learned this the hard way, spinning out in light drizzle. Pirelli recommended carrying a separate set of wet weather tires, though few owners bothered. The original P0s also had a shockingly short lifespan. Hard drivers could burn through a set in under 2,000 miles. At several $100s per tire in 1987 money, this got expensive fast. Some owners joke that they spent more on tires than gas. Today, finding original spec P0s for an F40 is nearly impossible, forcing owners to use modern alternatives that change the car's character. Lifed, fuel, bladders. Around 10 years. Here's a weird fact that many F40 owners discovered the hard way. European spec cars came with FIA-style rubber fuel cells that had an expiration date. These weren't normal fuel tanks. They were racing-style bladders designed to prevent fuel spillage in a crash. The rubber compound in these bladders degrades over time, regardless of use. After about 10 years, they start to break down, potentially contaminating the fuel system with rubber particles. Ferrari recommended replacement every decade, just like race cars require. But replacing F40 fuel bladders isn't like changing oil. The entire rear of the car has to come apart. The old bladders have to be carefully extracted without damaging surrounding components. New ones have to be delicately inserted and connected. The job takes days and costs thousands. Many owners ignored the 10-year recommendation, figuring their garage queen F40 didn't need it. Then they'd try to start the car after months of sitting and find their fuel system clogged with dissolved rubber. The repair bills were astronomical. Today, many F40 owners have converted to aluminum fuel tanks. They're not original, but they last forever and don't dissolve into expensive goo. Purist collectors still insist on the original bladders, accepting the maintenance headache as part of F40 ownership. Always Rosso Corsa and LHD Ferrari made exactly 0 factory options available for F40 color or steering wheel position. Every single F40 left Manel painted Rosso Corsa red and with the left-hand drive. No exceptions, no special orders, no amount of money could change this. Ferrari's reasoning was both practical and philosophical. They viewed the F40 as a piece of rolling sculpture that should look identical to Enzo's vision. Offering colors would dilute the impact. As for right-hand drive, Ferrari simply said the car was too focused on performance to accommodate different configurations. This policy drove certain wealthy customers crazy. The Sultan of Brunei, famous for his custom car collection, desperately wanted right-hand drive F40 models for his country. Ferrari said no. So what did he do? He bought multiple F40 cars and had them converted to RHD after delivery. These Brunei conversions required cutting apart the dashboard, moving all the controls, and essentially rebuilding half the interior. The work was supposedly done by Pininfarina, though Ferrari never officially acknowledged it. Today, these RHD conversions are controversial among collectors. They're incredibly rare, but not factory original. Perspex rear engine cover. That iconic louvered rear deck on the F40 features a Perspex window, basically Lexan or Plexiglass, instead of actual glass. This wasn't just about weight savings, though the Perspex was definitely lighter. The real reason was heat management. The twin-turbo V8 generated so much heat that regular glass could potentially crack from the thermal stress. The Perspex could handle the temperature swings better while still showing off the engine. But Perspex brought its own problems. The material scratches incredibly easily. Cleaning it wrong just once could leave permanent swirl marks. Some owners reported their engine cover windows turning yellow or cloudy after years of heat exposure. The worst part? Replacing a scratched or damaged Perspex window required removing the entire rear deck assembly. Ferrari didn't design it to be easily swapped. The job involved dozens of fasteners and careful handling of the valuable composite panel. Detailing an F40 engine cover became an art form. Specialists developed specific techniques using ultrafine polishes and soft cloths. Some owners became so paranoid about scratches that they'd cover the window with protective film when the car wasn't being shown. The irony is that the whole point was to display the engine, but many owners kept it hidden to preserve the Perspex. From 400 planned to around 13. 100-built Ferrari originally announced they would build exactly 400 F40 models to celebrate their 40th anniversary. Nice round number, exclusive enough to ensure values, but enough to satisfy their best customers. Then the orders started rolling in. Ferrari dealers reported deposit checks arriving by courier before the car was even officially revealed. Middle Eastern royalty ordered dozens. Japanese collectors wanted fleets of them. American enthusiasts mortgaged houses to get on the list. Ferrari faced a dilemma: stick to 400 and anger hundreds of loyal customers, or build more and risk diluting the exclusivity. They chose a middle path: keep building until demand naturally tapered off. The final production count varies depending on who you ask, but most sources say between 1311 and 1315 F40 cars were built. That includes 213 for the US market, which had slightly different specifications for emissions and safety requirements. Some Ferrari purists were angry about the expanded production. They felt Ferrari broke their promise and devalued the car. But looking back, even 1,300 cars seems incredibly limited for what became one of the most iconic supercars ever built. Rear deck. Took days to make that beautiful composite rear deck lid on the F40 wasn't stamped out in seconds like a normal car panel. The manufacturing process took approximately 3 full days per piece. This wasn't Ferrari being slow, it was the reality of working with advanced composites in the late 80s. The process started with carefully laying carbon fiber and Kevlar sheets into a massive mold. Each layer had to be positioned perfectly, with the fiber orientation calculated for maximum strength. Any wrinkles or air bubbles would ruin the part. Then came the resin infusion, where special epoxy was carefully introduced to bind the fibers. This had to be done slowly to avoid trapping air. The whole assembly then went into an autoclave, basically a giant pressure cooker, where heat and pressure cured the resin. After curing, the panel needed careful trimming, drilling of mounting holes, and installation of the perspex window. Each step required skilled craftsmen who understood composite materials. One mistake meant starting over from scratch. The 3-day timeline assumes everything went perfectly. Ferrari's composite shop had a significant rejection rate, with panels that didn't meet quality standards getting cut up and discarded. When you consider that each F40 needed multiple composite panels, all made this way, the production complexity becomes staggering. Mansel's F40 hit £1 million in 1990. The F40 speculation bubble of the late 80s and early 90s reached absurd levels, but nothing symbolized the insanity quite like Nigel Mansell's car selling for about £1 million in 1990. This was a time when you could buy a nice house for £50,000. Mansell, the Formula 1 champion, had ordered his F40 new and barely driven it. When he decided to sell, the market went crazy. Collectors saw it as the ultimate F40, owned by a racing legend, practically 0 miles, perfect condition. The sale price made headlines worldwide and established a new benchmark for modern supercar values. What made this even crazier was that F40 models were still in production. You could theoretically order a brand new one for a fraction of Mansell's asking price. But speculators had convinced themselves that F40 values would keep climbing forever. The bubble, of course, eventually burst. By the mid-90s, F40 prices had crashed back to earth. Cars that traded for £1 million were worth a third of that. Some speculators who bought at the peak lost fortunes. But Mansell timed it perfectly, selling at the absolute top of the market. Non-cat non-adjust is prized among F40 collectors. The most desirable cars are the early non-cat non-adjust models. These cars lack catalytic converters and the hydraulic suspension adjustment system that Ferrari added to later production. Why are these stripped-down versions worth more? It's all about weight and purity. The catalytic converters added significant weight and restricted exhaust flow, reducing power. The hydraulic ride height adjustment system, designed to help clear steep driveways, added complexity and more weight. Early cars without these features are the lightest, fastest, and most raw F40 models you can buy. They're also getting incredibly hard to find. Many countries require catalytic converters for road use, so some early cars have been retrofitted. The hydraulic suspension often fails with age, leading owners to convert back to the fixed setup. Determining if an F40 is truly non-cat, non-adjust requires careful inspection and documentation. Some sellers claim their cars are early spec when they've actually been modified. Serious collectors hire specialists to verify authenticity before purchase. The price difference between an early car and a later one can be hundreds of thousands of dollars. It seems crazy that missing features make a car more valuable, but in the F40 world, less really is more. Factory Scudoni Luggage. Existed Ferrari actually offered a 3-piece luggage set specifically designed for the F40, made by Italian leather craftsman Scudoni. This seems hilarious for a car with basically no storage space, but Ferrari found a way. The set included 2 small bags designed to fit in the minimal space behind the seats, and 1 larger piece that nestled into the front spare tire well. Each piece was shaped to maximize the F40's tiny storage nooks. The leather was specially treated to handle the extreme heat inside the car. But here's the thing, almost nobody ordered it. The Scudoni set cost as much as a nice used car, and F40 buyers weren't exactly planning weekend trips. Most considered it a waste of money and space. Today, finding a complete original F40 Scudoni luggage set is nearly impossible. They surface at auction occasionally and sell for astronomical prices to collectors who want every possible F40 accessory. Some owners have spent years hunting for individual pieces to complete a set. The irony is that anyone who owns this luggage would never actually use it. The pieces are too valuable and too delicate to throw in an F40 and risk damage. They're display pieces now, shown alongside the car at concourse events. It's the ultimate example of Ferrari selling accessories that nobody needed, but everybody now wants. Twin 31.7 gallon fuel cells. The F40 carries approximately 31.7 gallons of fuel split between two cells positioned just ahead of the rear wheels. That's race car style packaging, designed to keep weight centered and low. But it created some interesting challenges for everyday use. Having two separate fuel cells meant the F40 needed a complex system to balance fuel draw between them. Get it wrong, and you'd have one heavy tank and one empty tank, seriously affecting handling. Some early cars had issues with fuel starvation during hard cornering when one tank would run low. The racing-style positioning also meant the fuel cells were vulnerable in rear impacts. Ferrari added substantial crash structures around them, but owners still worried about parking lot fender benders. The dual-tank setup made fuel gauge accuracy a joke, so the gauge would swing wildly as fuel sloshed between the cells. Filling up required patience too. You had to fill one side, wait for fuel to transfer, then top off both sides. Gas station attendants were often baffled by the dual filler setup. Some F40 owners report spending 10 minutes or more at the pump, carefully balancing the tanks. The 31.7 gallon capacity sounds generous until you realize the twin-turbo V8 could drain it in under 200 miles of spirited driving. If you thought that was impressive, wait until you see what's coming up. A car that required you to be fitted for seats like a suit, Ferrari's accidental flamethrower, exhaust system, windows that literally fell out during corners, and much more. So let's continue. That's all for today, folks. If you enjoyed this video, don't forget to subscribe and hit that like button so you don't miss the next one. See you there.